Ever wonder which weapons will turn your mech into an unstoppable force? Let's break it down. Alright, first up we're going to start with the shotgun. The shotgun is trash because it does such little damage and it only has, I think, 5 shots. Similar to the fragment gun, but I'm going to put it in C tier. Next we have the arc torrent. The arc torrent is similar in damage wise. It does have a larger capacity, but it just doesn't do enough damage. Now, the amber guns are really good, but they're not. The only one that is S tier is the Revoker. Revoker is great, it has an insanely high DPS, and it has a longer range than all of these guys. Next we have the Repeater. The Repeater is decent in damage, but it just has too fast of a fire rate to shred through the mods. So I'm going to put you in B tier. And lastly, we have the Howlers. The Howlers are just like the fragment gun, but they do a lot more damage, but they're still extremely bad against mods. First up with the assault weapons, we have the auto cannon. I'm going to put you right in trash because he does only, I think, max 14,000 damage, maybe 10. But we have the plasma cannon, and we put you right next to autocannon. They're about the same. Next we have the pulse cannon. It's a lot better than both of these, but they're still really bad. They don't do nearly enough damage against mods, or the players that have mods. Next we have the fusion cannon. It's really bad, but it's not as bad as these three, and I think that it deserves to be in C tier. Next we have the carbines. The carbines are similar to the fusion cannon in damage, but they have a really low DPS, and they didn't even do well before the mods, so I'm going to put you in the back of C tier. And then we have the Overdriver. The Overdriver is pretty good against the mods, and it has a sustained fire rate, and it doesn't have a reload time. It only has a cooldown, which is great, and it has a pretty high DPS. Then we have the Vipers. The Vipers are also pretty good against mods and the mechs with mods, but they're not as good as the Overdriver, so I'm going to put you behind the Overdriver in A tier. And the first weapon we have for the missile weapons is the RPG. So the RPG I'm just going to put in trash or D tier because it's a common weapon and it does such little damage. Then we have the Voltic RPG that do a lot more damage, but they still do not do enough damage against the mechs with mods, and they don't do well against mods themselves. But on the other hand, we have the missile racks. The missile racks are great because they have a high DPS, they have a straight line of fire, and they do a lot of damage. So I'm going to put it in A tier. Next, we have the Disruptor. The Disruptor used to be really good for countering campers, but now with mods, they're not as good. So I'm just going to put them in the front of C tier for now. And now we have the Storm Racks. The Storm Racks are in the S tier for sure because they have an insanely high damage. They have a very big splash damage radius, and you can even make the reload time go down to 6 seconds with implants. First up in the beam weapons, we have the Thermal Lance. And the reason why I'm putting it in D tier is because of its damage. It has such a low damage, and it has a small mag capacity. Next, we have the Stasis Beams. The Stasis Beams are basically an upgraded version of the Thermal Lance. They do a lot more damage than it, but they're still not very good, so I'm going to put them in C tier. They don't do too well against mods or the mechs that have mods. Now we have the Graviton Beam. The Graviton Beam is way better than all of these weapons, but both of these weapons. It does a lot of damage, and it has an implosion effect that does even more damage. But it's still not exactly good, so I'm going to put it in B tier. And last but not least, we have the Particle Beam. The Particle Beam is better than the Graviton Beam in my opinion, but it's not exactly S tier material. It does pretty well against mods, but it just doesn't do enough damage, so I'm going to put it in A tier. Next we have the Guided Weapons. And first up we have the Javelin Racks. Javelin Racks are really good early game, but they get worse and worse the more you progress in Mech Arena. And by the time that you're able to get mods, they're really bad. So I'm gonna put you in C tier. Next, we have the Cryo Javelin Racks. These guys do more damage than the normal Javelin Racks, and they even slow down your enemy, but they still don't do enough damage to be in S tier, or A tier and B tier. So I'm going to put you in front of the Javelin Racks in C tier. Now we have the Helix Racks. The Helix Racks are a lot better than the Javelin Racks. They do a lot more damage. And they go higher in altitude than the Javelin Racks when fired. So I'm going to put you in B tier because of those reasons, and they just don't have enough ammo to break through the mods and deal damage to the enemy mechs. Next, we have the Savants. The Savants are going to be in C tier because they only have one salvo, and once you fire that salvo, it might only break the mods. So you'll have to fire the Savant, reload, and then fire again to even damage the enemy mech. And by that time, you'll probably already be dead. Now we have the Disc Launchers. The Disc Launchers used to be S tier. They used to be the best weapon in the game until they got nerfed. Twice. First time was where the splash damage for the disc launchers didn't do nearly as much damage as it used to, and then when mods came around, they do a lot less damage because they don't have that much ammo to penetrate the mods with, let alone kill the other mech. So I'm gonna put you in C tier. And the first weapon that we have for the sniper category is the long arm. The long arm is going in trash because it's an uncommon weapon and it does such little damage to the enemy mech, let alone the mods. And it has such a long reload time. But the Gauss rifle, on the other hand, is about the same. It is a rare weapon, but it still doesn't do enough damage to become weak, which is saying something. Then we have the Quantum Gun. They're a lot better than these two, but they still don't do a lot of damage. I'm going to put you in C tier. And now we have the weapon that used to be the #1 meta weapon. But now, because of mods and multi-layered mods, I'm going to put it in the front of C tier. Next we have railguns. Railguns are very similar to EM rifles. They just have a little bit more ammo. So I'd put them in the front of C tier. And now we have the new Tetra rifle. I think that this is the best sniper out of all of these, but it's not S tier. It does do a lot of damage, but it just doesn't have a high ammo capacity, so I'm going to put it in A tier. And next we have the mortars. So this will be really quick. I'll put these guys right there. Or actually, I'll put them in C tier. They're pretty weak, but they're not trash. And then we have the fuse mortars. That's an S tier. They are really good, and they're really annoying. They do a lot of damage, and if they don't hit you at first, they will just land and become a mine. Now we have the barrage weapons. First up, we have the cryo launchers. They are not too good, but without mods, they're pretty decent. But since there are mods, I'd say that they are pretty weak. Now on the other hand, we have the regular nades, which I'd say they are a lot better than the cryo launchers. They do a lot more damage, and they don't have a 3-round burst. You can just shoot them one at a time. So I'm going to put them in B tier. And now we have the pod gun. The pod gun I'd say is really good, but it's not exactly S tier material. It does have decent damage, but just not enough to become S tier. So I'm going to put it in A tier. Before we go on, I would just like to announce that we will be having a competition in the comments section. And if you win that competition, then your comment will be featured in next week's video. And this week's question for the competition is, which mech do you think works best with miniguns? And all you need to do to enter is comment that question and your answer. The person with the most likes by next week's video wins. Alright, back to the video. And last but not least, we have the heavy duty weapons. And first on that list, we have the miniguns. The miniguns are great. They have an insanely high DPS. They have a huge magazine. They do have a long reload time, but there are implants to fix that. So I'm gonna put you in S tier because of those reasons, and they do insanely well against the mods. Next, we have Dreadshot, the new weapon. Dreadshot does a lot of damage. It has a medium-sized magazine, but it doesn't do very well against the mods. So I'm gonna put it in C tier. And now we have another new weapon, Hellfire, which is basically a flamethrower and is very similar to minigun damage-wise. So I'm gonna put it in A tier. And then we have Chain Gun. Chain Gun is pretty decent against some mods if you have a stunning mech like Surge, Zephyr, or Hemlock with his Daze effect. But other than that, it's not too good. It does a lot of damage, but it has a build-up time. So because of those reasons, I'm going to put it in B tier. But what's the point if you know what the best weapons are if you don't even know what the best mechs are? So if you want to learn about the best mechs, then click this video right here and I'll see you there.